Welcome to Roaming with Restless Women, real talk with wise, dynamic women leaders. I'm your host, Julie Noonan, CEO and founder of Intuitive Wisdom Coaching, and I'm living my dream life. I live and work in my RV, coaching senior women leaders as they navigate corporate politics, family drama, and personal goals to live their own dream lives. These women are restless. They are never done seeking new opportunities, learning, and creating value in the world. If you'd like to apply to be on the show, stick around to the end and I'll let you know how. Let's go. Welcome to Roaming with Restless Women. I'm Julie Noonan, your host, and today I have Kristen Donnelly, Dr. Kristen Donnelly, I should say. Kristen is an award-winning, four-time TEDx speaker, international empathy educator, which we're going to talk about. I need to know exactly what that is. Author and researcher with over 2 decades of experience in helping people understand the beauty in difference and the power in inclusivity. She is one of the good doctors of Abbey Research, COO of their parent company, co-founder of the Community Research Institute, and an unapologetic nerd for stories of change. Kristen is a regular contributor to Forbes, Medium, and Thrive Global, and the co-author of the best-selling book, The Culture of Burnout: Why Your Exhaustion is Not Your Fault. I like that. Totally love that title of that book. She lives outside of Philadelphia with her husband, where they are surrounded by piles of books and several video game consoles. I love that too. I always like to start, Kristen, with asking you to describe your career journey and what event or trigger led to your current position.
My gracious. So I was one of those kids that started thinking about what I wanted to be when I grew up when I was like 9. And I would tell people what I was going to do. I had paths, I had clear, ideas. And some of them were like little kid things like Olympic swimmer and, like Broadway actress and stuff like that. I think the first one that I was really serious about was lawyer. And then and that was like for a little bit. My aunt was an attorney. She legally still is. She doesn't practice. And I really admired her a lot and wanted to do that. And then started really falling in love with student work. When I was 12, I was kind of asked in my faith-based youth group to spend some time with younger kids and mentoring them and kind of going with that. And so from 12 to 23, the goal was to be a permanent youth worker. And just go with, I don't know, I really, really love walking alongside teenagers through the hardest part of their lives
Yeah.
and helping them see that what feels permanent is actually temporary and helping them navigate all of those things. And then at around 25, 26, a couple events happened that kind of showed me that that was not the path and that that was not what was going to happen. And so shifted a little bit and thought like, okay, well, how else could I help? How else could I help young adults? I knew I wasn't going to be good in the formal education system. So how could I teach outside of that? And then that only got worse once No Child Left Behind kept getting more entrenched. That's not my skill set. I have so much respect for teachers in organized education, but it's not my skill set. And so higher ed seemed great. And I got a chance to, during my master's degrees and my doctorate, got a chance to do some student teaching, got a chance to teach whole classes. Really, really loved that. And then at the end of my higher ed journey, when I was kind of finishing my doctorate, I was looking around and I was saying, well, higher ed is a lot about other people making money on my ideas. And that seems lame. So, and at the same time, we've had a family business since I was 7. And I've been a part of it tangentially. We couldn't really figure out how I would be a part of it. It's manufacturing. And my degrees are in people. So there was a lot of like, we're not really sure what to do. And so as I was starting to question higher ed as a role for me or even as a sustainable model, my brother had started to enter into the process of taking over the company from our father. And as he started dreaming in new ways, because he's a different person, it's a different generation, he asked if I would come back and do kind of in-house social work. And
Oh,
what would shaping our mission as a family has always been to impact lives and create holistic wealth. But sometimes have we done that kind of accidentally? Well, maybe. So he wanted me to come in and he and I start really talking about an intentional shaping of that mission and what that would look like. And part of that then is that I created a division within the company called Abbey Research. Our company is called Abbey Companies. So I created Abbey Research with the express purpose of helping people. Like, I'm silly lucky in that I've gotten a lot of funding to study a lot of things. I'm incredibly privileged and incredibly blessed. And I have both a really like operational business knowledge and a lot of deep research. And research and like business and academia do not talk. They never talk.
I
And
know.
they both can teach each other quite a lot of things. And so I hung a shingle as a corporate trainer, then hired my best friend to do it when she finished her doctorate. And so since 2017, I've worn the kind of hats of being part of the overall vision of where the whole network of companies is going, as well as just like I make sure there's snacks in my office that my brother likes, like, emotional support snack giver. And my father too, because he's technically retired, but like boomer retired. So like he's here every day, which we're grateful for because his knowledge is uh is endless really about this place that he built. So we're grateful that he comes. Um, is so I spend a lot of time researching things like burnout and right now multi-generational workspaces and what does shifts in generation mean and how does technology affect that and belonging and what does that mean for your office. And I kind of get
Mhm.
to dig into these big ideas with Erin and Eleanor, the three of us that form Abbey Research. And then I get to go and like plunge a toilet and just remember that like,
Yeah.
business is business is business is business and leadership is leadership wherever you are. So that's kind of been the journey. I'm really happy with where I am now. I get to teach like I always wanted to. I get
Hmm.
to make arguments like I've always wanted to. And
Yeah,
I get to help people see the world differently like I've always wanted to. And so I'm really privileged to be where I am.
that's wonderful. And so you have a company within a company almost.
Yes, yes.
That's amazing. So in addition to serving your parent company, do you also serve companies outside of yours?
Oh, for sure. I mean, as best we can, like they hire
Hmm.
us to come in,
Right.
and we'll do, it's, any number of things from trainings to conversations to leadership groups. We're not coaches. We're very clear about that. That's not our skill set. We know a lot of lovely and wonderful coaches that we're happy to like to resource people to depending on what they need. But what
Hmm.
we want to do is the nitty gritty of education. And we want to really help people see that the facts they think are true may not be. And so
Okay.
um, how do we reshape your understanding of burnout and how do we operationalize that understanding to actually reduce your turnover? How do we
Yes.
do those things? That's what we're particularly interested in. And we've helped people from professional basketball teams to daycare centers to universities to like, it's fun. It's fun. We did chemical manufacturers and elementary school teachers within a 48-hour period once, and that was really fun. So
Oh man. Very diverse, very, very
very.
diverse. But at the bottom, I mean, at the end of all things, and I was a trainer too for many, many years in corporate America. And, you know, it all boils down ultimately to everyone is human.
Oh yeah.
We have a set of needs, the hierarchy of needs. Um, we have a set of needs and we have certain ways that we like to learn. And the content is what changes over time. Because as we learn new things or as AI comes in, for instance, there's a need to keep everyone learning and growing. But at the end of the day, you always have to ask the all important question, what's in it for me? When you're dealing with adults in particular. So tell me about some of the curriculum pieces that you guys have built and what are some of the hot topics right now?
Well, for sure, burnout.
Yeah.
There was just an article published in Inc., I believe, yesterday that 5,000 top CEOs in the country say burnout is their biggest concern for 2025. So that is certainly one we're
Mhm.
talking about a lot. We have a very distinct take on burnout. Our
Okay.
argument is that burnout is there's lots and lots of forms of burnout around the world. Lots of places burn out, but the burnout that happens in America is uniquely American
Oh,
because
okay.
it traces the roots of American burnout trace back to the 1600s. And we've accepted burnout as a necessary part of success in the United States because we have been taught since the 1600s that hard work is a moral value and that
Yes.
rest is a failure. And so
Yes.
we have tied those things together. They very easily line up with capitalism. And so we have tied those things together and we have perpetuated exhaustion as a badge of honor for centuries. So the American dream requires burnout, yours or someone else's. And that's what it comes down to. So
Hmm.
that's a big one. That's obviously a lot of our book and a lot of our trainings. And then we have a framework that kind of tells you what to do about that, how to make micro changes in your life that create more space for emotional capacity and more space to prevent against burnout or to recover from it wherever you are. Then we'll do basic, we'll do implicit bias training and some other things like that, which are all centered around our understanding of empathy as a non-emotional set of decisions and a non-emotional framework with which you see the world. And it is a decision to choose understanding over assumptions, not
Yes.
agreement, not anything like that, but understanding.
Hmm.
And then our third one is especially in the last like 6 months, people not really understanding how generations are so different and how things work the way they work. We've been running a generational research institute for about 4 years. So we do
Nice.
have quite a lot of data and quite a lot of stories and quite a lot of examples of how to make multi generational spaces happen. And what we really love to do is explain, like, okay, well, you think this person is not sending an email because they're really lazy. Okay, well, we just want to let you know they've never been taught to send emails, they've never gone to typing class, they don't know these things, and that sounds preposterous to you. We recognize that, but Gen Z is also the first generation that predominantly did not have jobs during high school or college. So it's
Yes.
possible they've never been taught to be in an office. So you can keep getting mad at them, your prerogative, or you can accept that they're different than you, figure out what they need to know, walk alongside of them, because growth is really quickly possible when you approach someone as a human and not as a product you are disappointed in. So those are
Hmm.
kind of the three buckets that we spend a lot of time in. We play games and we're interactive and we crack jokes and all that kind of stuff. Aaron and I kind of have a have a whole routine we get to do together, which is really fun. But that's the things, and it all comes back to this, Julie. In all your years, it all comes back to, like you said already, humans are humans, and different
Yes.
people are different, and we just try to help whoever we're talking to strip back their assumptions and remember that how they do human is not the only way. And then if you can
Yes.
grasp that basic understanding, we can go a lot of fun places.
I love how you just said that, how they do human, because how everyone does human is unique.
Mm-hmm.
There are infinite varieties of how you do human. And when you realize that, I think you can start to see the value in the uniqueness. Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about the micro inequities or the micro biases, the micro assumptions. Tell me a little bit more about your work in and around diversity and inclusion.
Sure.
Mhm.
We don't get to do it as much anymore. I will say we get hired for that less and less, but that also has to do with a lot of the news around the fact that companies are, since the boom of the funding in 2020, they've started cutting that funding back, which
Of
tells us only
course.
that its work is more and more important.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so our contention is that there are diversities beyond what you can see.
Yes.
And so creating true inclusion is creating spaces where everybody can show up to whatever conversation on their terms and not the terms that you put upon them. So a lot of professional women have been like the token professional lady in the room, and they're expected to speak for all women about whatever. it's not interesting to me to be the only woman in the room, but it might be really interesting to me to be the only neurodivergent woman in the room or
Yeah.
neurodivergent person. Or I would love to bring disability into it, or I would love to bring a lot of other things. But when I'm shoved into the box of only being the lady, I can't bring my full self because you've eliminated quite a lot of things. And obviously this happens to women of color significantly more than it happens to white women,
Yes.
but it happens all over the place. And there are, depending on what culture you're in and what culture you're not in, um, privileges and oppression shift and kind of move. The degree of severity shifts and moves kind of wherever you are. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we can again strip back, you know what, like Erin and I are kind of, our whole thing is that we make stuff way too complicated. And so if we could just keep stripping stuff back and be like, hey, you are a human person with all of these things. You are a beautiful constellation of attributes, as they say in Must Love Dogs. And you are a gorgeous intersectional tapestry, as you know, Dr. Crenshaw says. You are all these things. Amazing. Guess what? So is everyone else.
Yeah.
And so if you can show up with grace for them and show up with grace for yourself, we can all figure this out. And you know, I remember when I was growing up, and I was growing up in the church, there would be a whole lot of like these really complicated conversations about theology. And even when I was in seminary, these complicated conversations about theology. And I would just sit there and I'd be like, so there are two lines in the Gospels, and we haven't nailed those. So I'm not sure why we're so concerned with all this other stuff. If we could just go back to love your neighbor as yourself,
Yeah.
let's try to nail that.
Yeah.
Like let's give that one a go. I'm not as concerned about all these debates over everything else as I am about how do we love people. And that's in a
Right.
very real, I've carried that now to my professional business life, is we can have all these other conversations about all the statistics everybody does, and we can talk about turnover and ROI and KPIs and all of that. But what I want to know is, are you treating your folks with dignity?
This episode is sponsored by me. So, as a special gift to you, our listeners, I offer a free one-on-one 15-minute breakthrough session. Bring a problem and experience how coaching works to see if it could be of value to you. Sign up for an available time on my website, intuitivewisdomcoach.com.
Are you treating them with respect? And if not, why?
And are they treating each other the same way?
Mm-hmm. Are you creating an environment of dignity and respect? And if not,
Yes.
why? Because it's, the answer is not we have to make profits. Okay, lots of folks have to do that. Everybody does, actually. That's what being a business is.
Yes.
Or you're running a nonprofit, and even then you have to make money. Technically, it's just not
Yes.
taxable. But a lot, millions and millions of other companies around the world have managed to do this, so why can't you? And if you can't answer that question, please go take a long hike through some forest and figure it out and come back. And then we'll go from there. Which is sarcastic. And I don't actually say that to people, but it is very much what I think. We've owned this thing for 30 plus years,
Mm-hmm.
and we've never laid anyone off.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been hard, but it's also one of our central principles. And so other things become harder because that's a central principle and it's never the first answer. So how do you organize that? Is a big part of yeah, how I teach.
One of the main tenets of my executive coaching is essentially um, the intrinsic value of human beings
Hmm.
is over and above anything else.
Hmm.
No extrinsic thing, no product, no system, no idea is ever greater than the intrinsic value of a human being.
100%.
Right. So, absolutely. So, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what is one thing that you work with groups of teams about specifically that is more seems to be more of a challenge these days than it has been in the past. You mentioned the intergenerational piece, but what other workshops do you do that tackle big issues?
Okay, so they've all always been hard
Yeah.
because I've never done the shallow stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I've always, I mean, even like keynotes and sermons and everything. Like I started public speaking when I was 12.
Yeah.
And I think I don't remember anything that at one point was harder and then got easier. Like it's always been, because again, I'm trying to get to the absolute core of everything, and that if
Yeah.
that makes people uncomfortable because they
Yeah.
very much like to do the quick fixes, and I'm standing up there and going, there is none. Um, so no, I don't think I have any, honestly.
Hmm.
There has been, I think burnout has gotten more emotional for like we've had
Yeah.
more people come up to us at conferences or at after talks or things and tell us harder stories.
Yeah.
And we've had to learn to carry a little bit more trauma disclosures than we had before. So harder on us maybe, but not more difficult to the audience at all.
Okay. All right. So with the change, there seems to be, and at least this is my observation of the world. It seems to be that there has been a backlash from and I'm going to just say this probably the wrong way, the traditional male, you know, provider, old school, whatever you want to call them, even in the younger generations, there's been a backlash against women, against diversity and inclusion to some extent. Tell me if you guys have run into that and how you have overcome it.
I mean, that's a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah.
I mean, we're digging into a lot of research about that right now. So like academically and data wise, I have a lot in my head that I could give you. Um, it is definitely happening among people most under 30. There is definitely a
Yes.
swing back to that. And a lot of it is about kind of finding belonging in places and a real we stripped away a lot of places for them to learn how to be human outside of their houses. We took away, places where you could hang out in shopping malls and basketball courts and all these kind of other things, and we privatized a lot of those. And so they haven't really learned, and so they're learning how to do their sexuality and their gender and their community and their everything else, on TikTok as a derivative, but like on everywhere. And so it's a lot easier when you're alone to center yourself as the seat of power. When you are in community, you are constantly exposed to other views of life and power and things as such. The algorithms don't allow for that as much. And
Mm,
so we are seeing a fairly, not direct. I don't want to say there's a lot of other factors. But the other factor is that since the 1980s, there's been both in organized religion and in American politics, there's been a really strategic bend back, I'm going to use air quotes, to, a perception of what the 1950s were like and a
right.
perception of what that was and an attempt to recreate what we know wasn't ever actually happening, but what people remember, they think they remember was happening. And so that's a big deal. That's a real big deal. And just in history, it's funny, we see this a lot. Like in the 1910s, there was this massive excitement, like 1900s up to like 1912, this massive excitement about how everything was progress and it was wonderful and the world was healing and everything's fantastic.
And
And
then
then
we
we
had a
sent a
war.
bunch of boys to trenches to die in France. And like everyone went real conservative and real pessimistic and real, real like internal and real everything. And that's why it took us so long to enter World War II. So this has happened in, before.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's a definite pushback. I mean, you can see how the word woke is used as a weapon, is a really good example of it.
Hmm.
Um, and at the same time, I think it's almost like parallel. Like there's people pulling us continually along the path that we were at the same time that people are trying to U-turn. And so you've got athletes who are, professional athletes and people in the public eye who are talking about humans like more as objects. Then you have Caitlin Clark as, the athlete of the year saying like, I can't wait for us to recognize Black women's, contributions to the WNBA. And those don't cancel each other out,
Hmm.
but we need to remember with some level of hope that they both exist.
Hmm.
Of course, if you are somebody who would like us to return back to what you thought of, then you think I'm crazy and you don't love the idea that I just used, hope. But in terms of social cohesion, I'm a sociologist. In terms of social cohesion, we actually don't want returns to more conservatism. More conservatism causes significantly more divisions and significantly more inequity. So if you're interested in society getting along better, you actually want more progressivism. As uncomfortable as that might be, it's just the scientific truth.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the reasons why I brought this up is because what I'm seeing, particularly in the in the Gen Z, late millennial uh, population of young men, what
Yeah.
I'm observing is almost a need to reclaim their machoism.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
White young men in particular,
yeah,
white European and American young men. Yep.
correct. And that is what is leading a lot of the we should, we have to protect women, or this whole my wife is going to stay at home with the kids, regardless of
Yeah.
if the wife has a career or ambition to do something else. It's kind of starting to it's raising its ugly little head
It's very
in a lot of
pernicious.
places.
It's very pernicious. And there's a
Yes,
couple
it
books out
is.
there that are trying to kind of drill it down to this is the reason it is like this.
Yeah.
And again, as social scientists, there is never one explanation ever.
No.
So I get nervous about those. But some of them are good pieces of the explanation.
Yes.
And a piece that I have yet to feel disproven to myself is that kids growing up on devices teaches them individualism at a rate we were not prepared for.
Mm,
And we were not prepared for people to not. I don't know, it's like something I read once. It's like one of the biggest things is that like kids who were teenagers 2012 and after, which is when Instagram really came out, like they're not good at recognizing facial expressions, like at a much lower
wow.
rate than previous generations. And they can recognize them on a screen, but they can't recognize them in person. Like they can't pick up social cues as easily because they spend more time on screens than with other people. And so they
Right.
just didn't learn that at the same rate that other generations learned that. And one of the ramifications of that is that you either believe everything is about you in a negative way or in a positive way. Um, and that kind of isn't taught out of you in a way. So that's one thing.
Hmm.
Um, but I am the more I dig into this, the more I do not blame these kids for the lot they've been given. There's a lot of very specific decisions that adults made,
Yeah.
and that put them in these positions. They are making decisions to perpetuate the world that they have been presented with when given other opportunities. But I hate demonizing anyone. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense to me. There are significant problems. There are significant problems. And I think in the last 3 months, some data about public decisions has shown us that they're even deeper than we maybe thought. And
Yes.
like I remember incels were a thing when I was in college, when I was in graduate school, was when that the swimmer from Stanford got forgiven from sexually assaulting a woman so badly in a dumpster that she wasn't recognizable. And the judge said, well, we need to remember his potential. And that was like 2008, 2009.
I don't remember that, but boy,
Yeah, his name was Brock something
mm.
or another. I can't remember.
Okay.
And there was a guy who there was a college student who assaulted women because they wouldn't go on dates with him. So like that's been around for a while, and like
Yeah.
4chan and all of that has been around for a while. And I think the movement for the movement back to um I will not marry anyone who will not stay home with with our
Mm,
children, and we will start having children as soon as we get married, is a piece of that puzzle.
hmm.
I don't think it's that divorced from that. It's less violent for sure. It's less socially violent. It's less physically violent. But you can make arguments that it's socially violent. So again, if people get to make the choice that they make, they get to make whatever choice they want to make. And if people's choices are to do that, then their choice is to do that. And we need to be careful as people who would not make that choice to not judge it just because it's not our choice. That was not a very public narrative, though. It is now a public narrative again. And in terms of social patterns, that is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this has been a great conversation so far. I wish we could keep going, but I do have a time limit. I need to ask you my last three questions. Do you have anything else to add before we get into those?
No.
Okay, awesome. Here we go. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes real quick. And I'm going to say a phrase, and I want you to describe what you see in your mind's eye when I say wise woman.
My grandmother, my maternal grandmother in particular, who was in her lifetime buried 2 husbands and raised 3 girls largely on her own,
Wow.
and survived a lot. So that's her.
Oh, that's perfect. All right, perfect. Where do you like to roam, Kristen?
Anywhere, absolutely anywhere. But I met my husband in Northern Ireland, and so whenever we go back there, there's a roaming there, and then also Epcot in at Disney in Florida. I love roaming there.
Well, I live in Orlando, so
Ooh, jealous.
well,
I love
I
it.
live in Orlando in the winter. Let's put it that way. I live in my RV and we travel
Oh, nice,
all
nice.
summer and spring and fall, but yeah, this is our winter spot right now. And what makes you restless, Kristen, in a good way?
That I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
That I've felt very strongly my whole cognizant life that I was put here for purposes,
Yes.
and I haven't filled those yet. And it is my responsibility to leverage my privilege for power. And so I could keep doing that. And that's what makes me restless.
You know what I really love about what you just said? My purpose is plural. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as human beings to try to figure out what our purpose is,
Mm.
singular. I don't, yeah. And that's just a lot of pressure, because how do you know? If you like 1,000 things and you can do 1,000 things and create all this value in the world, there may not be just one purpose for you. There usually is more than one purpose.
And sometimes there needs to be more because one dies and you have to grieve the death of that dream or your
Yes.
perception. And so you
Yes.
have to realize that there's more coming. And there's more, there's different things. And we also have to stop denigrating stuff that doesn't feel like a purpose, like loving people well and creating community and providing home and advocating for the fatherless and the homeless. And like those are all
Yes.
purposes too. Just because you're not called to be Oprah does not mean that you are purposeless. And we need to reframe things into smaller packages that are at the core of what humans do anyway.
100% agree. 100% agree. Well, Kristen, this has been such a pleasure talking with you, especially since you just exude all of this excitement and, have the research to back up your opinion, and you have ways to help people, get through their biases and get to the real thing. And I really, really appreciate about you. So how can people get in touch with you all?
Great question. So the best place is the website for our book, actually, because it's the easiest to remember.
Okay.
So it's cultureofburnout.com. And there's ways to email us from there, and obviously find out about the book and stuff like that. But that's the easiest one to remember. So cultureofburnout.com.
I'm putting it right here in my notes, so we make sure to put it in the show notes. And folks, make sure you take advantage of looking at the book, looking at the topics and subjects that the good doctors are offering to the world right now and as part of their purpose. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Kristen, and we will talk with you later.
Julie Noonan here. Thank you so much for listening to Roaming with Restless Women. If you're a successful senior woman leader who would like to be on this program, please visit podcast.intuitivewisdomcoach.com. If you enjoyed this interview, please share this episode on social media and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Your thumbs ups and reviews go a long way.